Welcome back to the Parrot Podcast. I'm your host, Sandra. I hope that you're all having a clawsome day. I am joined today by my wet chicken co-host because she decided to take a bath right before this episode. So while she's drying off, we're going to get chatting with David, who is a bird dad to a flock of 8. And he is known as the Parrot Teacher on social media. He shares lots of tips and training and all things parrots. Him and bird nerd Sophie also provide a consultation service for other parrot owners through Best Behaved Birds, whether you need help with behaviors or guidance and things like that. So he's really knowledgeable in not only conures and cockatiels, but all types of parrots. So we're going to get chatting on what it's like to have such a big flock at home. We're also going to talk about hormones because 'tis the season, and we're going to talk about a lot of other really awesome things, including how to make seeds healthier for your birds, which I'm really excited about. So let's jump in and get chatting with David. David, I'm so excited to have you on the Parrot Podcast. Welcome.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Me and Pickles are joining you today.
Yeah, it's so nice to see Pickles. And Mia is over here. She took a bath earlier, so she was a wet chicken. And now she's just drying off and napping. But it's so nice to meet Pickles. So let's jump into you starting off with letting us know about your flock. How many birds do you have in your flock? What species? How old are they? Right, Pickles? You're going to tell
Yeah.
us too.
So we have 8 birds. We have 2 cockatiels who are 5. She wants to have a poop now. Lovely. Thank you, Pickles. We have 4 green cheeks. Pickles is one of them. We also have Olive, Scampi, and Louis. And Louis only has 1 leg, and he's Kipling's friend. And by the way, our cockatiel is a chip and fish, just in case I forgot that. And then we also have 2 Crimson Bellies, which are Kipling and Charlie.
Okay, and from the 4 green cheeks, what are their different variations?
Oh my God. So I'm terrible with this. Like I know obviously what types they are. I know their ages and I know all the stuff about their weight and all that, all the things that I feel important. But when it comes to color mutations, I don't really care, honestly. Scampi is a yellow-sided conure, even though to me it looks different. Pickles is a cinnamon turquoise or something. Sophie's probably going to yell at me in the other room that I've got that wrong. Olive is another turquoise, whatever. And Louis,
Olive is a
Pickles,
turquoise, yellow-sided, just like
yeah.
Mia. I know
So for
that.
me, it's just so unimportant to me. I don't really care about their color mutations. I think they're all awesome, and I love them all basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And how old are all of that? Are all of your birds?
She wants a drinky. You can have 1 sip. She was like this on the live as well. This is fruit juice, by the way. It's nothing naughty. Otherwise, I wouldn't be letting her have any.
Yeah. What kind
They
of fruit
vary.
juice?
Sorry,
What kind of fruit juice?
I'd mix like pineapple and a couple of other fresh squeeze things.
Oh, lucky
Yeah, she
pickles. That
loves
must be so
loves her juice.
delicious.
But
Mia.
age-wise, they range from about 4 all the way through to 6. I think the oldest is 6.
Okay. And tell us really quickly, how did you get into birds? How did all of these birds come into your life?
So I've been to birds pretty much all my life. I've always kept pet birds in one form or another. I really loved them. I've always found them interesting, but I never really had the opportunities to have so many. So just start off with these guys then. So we got chip and fish a few years ago after something else happened with another bird, which is kind of sad. And then we got Pickles, who was our first rescue. And then we got Scampi as another rescue. Then we got Olive as another rescue. Then we took on Louis and Kipling because their previous owner couldn't take care of them anymore. And we felt that if we didn't take them on, because Kipling's quite a difficult case, and because Louis only had 1 leg, they may have ended up in that rescue system forever. So we made an exception and took them on. And then we took on Charlie for a friend for Olive. And I think we've got far too many, honestly, but they're all lovely. They're all got their lovely personalities, and we're probably pretty well suited to look after them all.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all really lucky to be in your home. And I know I've chatted with Sophie a little bit about all of your birds as well. But tell me a little bit about the challenges of having a bird with 1 leg, because I think that that's also really unique. We've never had anybody on the podcast with that type of situation. So tell me, like, how did this happen to Louis, and what have been like your biggest challenges in having to, help him around your home?
So with Louis, we don't know how it happened. It happened to him before his previous owner took him on. So we think it happened with his original breeder. It's kind of sketchy what the information is on there because they didn't even tell his previous owner what happened when he took him on. With regards to challenges, I mean, Louis despite having one leg, is very active. He's very naughty. He's very cheeky. He's very silly. He basically doesn't really let it hold him back much. However,
Yeah.
we've got to make some adaptations, obviously, because he can't clamber as easily as the other birds. If he needs to rest, he can't just tuck one of his feet up and fluff up. He can't do that because he only has one. So we've included more platforms in his cage to give him places to rest. We've made sure that everything is accessible so he can like climb and navigate the cage easier. When he's out and about, we try to train things that we know he can actually do. For example, he's not going to be able to wave because he wouldn't be able to do that. So we train things that he's actually capable of, and he does a very adorable spin. He's target trained. So we just basically try to see what we can do around his disability. And also what's really useful is Kipling, despite being an absolute monster to humans due to his past experience, is really nice to Louis. He's really considerate to him. He lets him rest on him. He looks after him basically. And it's really quite sweet to see.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute. I love it. I love like the cute bonding between birds. You mentioned about Kipling, how you thought that it was possible that he could have ended up as a rescue for a really long time because he's been a very challenging bird. Can you describe for everybody listening, like what do you mean by challenging? Like what is it about Kipling that makes him challenging? And how do you navigate that to, you know, deal with all of those challenging behaviors?
Okay, so um, me and Sophie are like professional bird trainers, so we have
Yeah.
quite extensive experience in it. And I think he's probably our most challenging case. And it's quite ironic that he's in with us rather than we've helped someone else with it. He is the most challenging. And one thing to start off with, he's a Crimson Bellied conure, and I'm not sure 100% that crimsons really should be kept as pets, and that's pretty controversial to say. They are incredibly charming, they're incredibly intelligent, they're just interesting birds, they are full of personality. However, as a generality, and obviously each bird is an individual, so I'm not going to say all crimsons are terrible because there's probably absolutely lovely ones out there, but they are quite difficult to deal with sometimes. And their precursors, the things they do before they're going to do something, are quite quick. So if they're going to bite you, you don't get much warning of it, especially when you have Kipling, whose past experience is quite traumatic. He was mistreated in a couple of houses previously before he went to the previous owner. They worked really hard on it, but there's only so much they could do with their resources and limited experience.
Mhm.
So then he's come here, and we've made a lot of progress with him. He gets on much better with Sophie than he does with me. He hates men purely because most of his past experiences have been with men, basically really bad, bad mistreatment. So I
Yeah.
have to do a lot of extra work, and he's made a lot of progress. But a lot of the things that we use as training techniques, obviously they work, but they don't work as effectively with him. We often talk about positive reinforcement and using treats, and he is very treat motivated, and he will train very well. But the moment those treats disappear, he is going to be looking for other activities and other ways of getting reinforcement. And obviously for him, his learning history is biting. The only way he can get attention is by people just get, where do you want to go? You're not having more juice yet. He wants to bite. He does naughty things, and it's something you have to work on. And you really have to. I think you wanted to talk about a bit about later. Observe your bird, and you
Yeah.
have to observe him. You have to watch for those precursor behaviors because they're so sudden with him. And it's just such a complex mishmash because we've dealt with lots of difficult birds. Like, as I said at the start, 6 of our birds are rescues, and they all came with behavioral challenges because they've been mistreated. And we've worked through a lot of them. Even Charlie, one of our recent birds have come in. He's so much better already. With Kipling, that journey is much, much longer. It's taking years. And that's something I did. Well, actually, I recorded recently. I haven't put it out yet. I did a video on rescues not being quick fixes because there's a lot of stuff that's said online about how if you get a rescue, you need to fix it in this amount of time. And I hate the word fix either because it fixes implies
Yeah.
something. And it's not the reality. Sometimes it takes a long time to work with a bird. Sometimes it takes a long time to rehabilitate them and to get them trusting you. And with Kipling, that timescale's years. I mean, there's a great Amazon account. I won't shout them out purely because I don't know if they want to be, but they have worked with Amazon for years now. And that bird is finally showing signs of progress and being happier. And that's what you have to be prepared for in some situations. And it's difficult for people because, you know, you may have the best of intentions and you may think, wow, I'm going to do it. And you've heard all this jargon online. But when you take that bird in, it may not work that way. And it's really hard to cope with sometimes. I mean, I struggle sometimes internally to think, oh my God, I feel like I'm not very good, despite all the experience and what we've done. And I'm like, oh, why is it so bad? So I can only imagine how other people feel who aren't used to dealing with it. That's a bit.
Yeah.
big rant, wasn't it? Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what the podcast is for. We just love to ramble. There was a lot of really great points that you brought up, and so I want to touch on a little bit of all of them. But I'm gonna go back to the beginning, and you mentioned that crimson bellied conures tend to be difficult, and you don't think that they should be, pets or birds that we have at home. And what is it like when we're looking at, like, say, green cheek conures or sun conures or crimson belly conures, like the differences that you've noticed?
So with green cheek, so crimson bellies, I don't think they've been in the pet trade for as long as the other species. So
Okay.
that may be a factor. I don't, obviously, I'm not going to say that for certain, so I'm not 100% on that. I'll have to look into it a lot more. With green cheeks, you find that they show more precursor behaviours, again, dependent on the individual parrot,
Of
before they
course.
can do something, which you can work with. Because if you reinforce something before, so say your parrot's going to bite you, and they lean away first, or they show like a bit of feather ruffling, whatever, you can stop there, and then that way they'll show you that more. But with a crimson, you don't really get that warning as often. You will go in for that step up, and you'll just get nailed. And it's very hard to pick up on those precursors, and they are there. Obviously, they are there. You can see them, but you have to be a lot more observant. And this isn't just our experience, because I hate to just base stuff on what we experience anecdotally, because I don't feel it's very scientific. It's not very useful. So before I started saying this, I did a lot of research, or whatever I could find online, because there's not that much. A lot of the stuff
Yeah.
online says, oh, they're amazing, they're cute, they'll just love you, and it's just not true. I talked to a lot of other owners. I think I've talked to about 50 different crimson owners now, just asking, what's happened, what they do, and it's basically the same story. And I did a couple of videos in the comment section. You just see it over and over again. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. It is a
Yeah.
species trait, and
Interesting.
yeah, it is interesting how they like this, because you wouldn't expect it. I mean, some conures can be very loud and quite quick to react to things as well, but crimsons are on a different league.
Yeah. Interesting. That's really interesting how different they can be from the green cheeks and the sun conures. Now you and Sophie have two crimson bellied conures. It's Kipling and Charlie, right?
Yeah.
And do you find that Charlie is as challenging as Kipling, or how different are their personalities as individuals?
That's an awesome question, because it allows me to highlight something really important. So obviously Kipling has had a very difficult past in many ways. Charlie has had is a rehome. However, his past isn't been as traumatic or difficult. So their individual experiences are very different. So
Yeah.
Charlie's much easier to work with. Now, Charlie had some bad experiences with someone who looked like me, his previous vet. So that didn't help with our relationship when he first came in. And obviously parrots will react differently in different environments. But Charlie's a lot easier to work with, purely because his learning history, his past history is completely different. Now, all those crimson elements are still there. He gets very excited very quickly. He will still bite. I hate to use the word unexpectedly, but let's just go with that. Unexpectedly, sometimes without showing you much signs of why he's doing it or what. Just be extra observant. But he's been much easier to work with. They're both extremely intelligent. They're both very vocal. They're both very treat motivated. But with Charlie, that treat motivation can be used a lot more. So the progress I've made with Charlie has been a lot quicker, purely because his past history has been different. So the individual bird is so important there, despite those species trait. With Charlie, he's recalling to my better hand consistently now. He is able to be out with me consistently. We can play, I can vocalize around him without getting overstimulated. It's easier on Sophie as well. He does have his challenges as well, obviously, because, like I mentioned, Crimsons, but because of that learning history being so different and his previous experience being so much more positive, it's much easier to work with him.
Okay. Very interesting. But yeah, I think that, like, with birds, I think with the different species, they do have like specific characteristics that you're like, green cheeks are more, for example, cuddly than maybe some other species. But as individuals, they also have different pasts and different personalities and so on. You talked a little bit about how they're treat motivated. So I want to talk a little bit about treats, because I know you and Sophie talk about the treat hierarchy test. And I know that you have a really awesome video on YouTube about this, where you have a paper and you write down where the different treats are and you lay them out and you see what your bird goes for. So can you share with anybody who's listening, like, if you want to do training and you're working with your bird, why it's important to find out which treats motivate them and how to go about doing this test?
I mean, sure. I mean, me and Sophie have been increasingly finding that treat motivation is really, really important for any kind of training success. It's not
Yeah.
100%, because there's all sorts of other reinforcing things. are things that make behavior more likely to occur in the environment. Maybe you as a person could be reinforcing to your parrot, but with traits, it gives you a primary reinforcer, which means something they need and want to survive. And normally that's food, water. You don't really use water for it though. It's not really as consistent. Naughty stuff is another one, and choice, which is another really important one. But as you said, let's focus on the food. So if your parrot hasn't got much motivation for training, it's because they're not motivated for. There's no reason for them to do it. If someone asks me to do some work for them or do something that I necessarily wouldn't be motivated to do, they need to provide me some compensation. It's the same for our parrots. If we want them to do something, we need to give them something that's worth the effort. And
Yeah.
treats are a great way of doing that. And the way you do that is by making sure their diet's healthy, and you make sure that these treats only come to them when they're foraging or when they're training with you. It increases their motivation. If they've got nothing but seed in there, why do they want to work for seed? What's the point? If you're giving them loads of fruit or high sugar pellets or nutriberries every day, why bother? So it's really important to get that balance. And by doing it this way as well, which we'll talk about the test in a second, it allows you to still give them all those lovely yummies. They can still get everything, but they're getting it in a way that gets them to interact with you, a fun way through foraging and enjoying themselves. With regards to the test, like what you do is you basically just test what they like. So you can do it on a piece of paper with little circles and whatever like, way we did it, and then observe which they go for first, second, and third. Do it a few times. You can also just do it by having a bowl with some treats in it. If they're a bit worried about the paper, have some
Yeah.
treats in the bowl. Step back if you're first bonding with your bird, observe which ones they go for, let them pick, do it a few times and until you get a consistent result. Because it is a scientific test basically, you're just doing repetitions to get an idea of what your bird wants. It also changes throughout the year as well. For example, Scampi will sometimes want sunflower seeds, other times of the year, safflower goes top. And then you just save those treats and then use them for foraging and training work. And then your bird's screaming less because it's foraging more because it's looking for treats. Your bird is recalling to you more consistently because you're giving it something that makes it worthwhile. If you're bonding with your bird, it means those treats mean, oh wow, that person's giving me great things all the time, so I want to spend more time with them. A lot of some old school people say it's like bribery, but how is it bribery? It's just you're giving your bird something worthwhile in exchange for something.
Exactly. Absolutely. I actually did this with Mia in the beginning to try and figure out like what is her motivation. And so I would just like have the jars lined up with all of her treats and then put one of each in front of the jar and see what she was going for the most. So I know her favorite is walnuts and pine nuts. Those are her number ones. But then I know that those are her treat motivators and it's not something that she has in her diet all the time. And I love that you mentioned that, you know, if someone's on an all seed diet, then those seeds, or if they're getting those nuts all of the time, it's not going to be a motivation for them. So another thing that we need to look at is what is the diet and how can we improve the diet and incorporate more of a balance and more veggies and grains and legumes and all that good stuff so that we can reserve those fruits and nuts and seeds for training or foraging so that they can have that mental stimulation and exercise as well. Um, I want to talk a little bit about observation because you did a really great video that I watched and I loved it called Observing Parrots and Why It's So Useful. And I think that it's, you know, I'm always like doing research on like what are parrots doing in the wild and how can I mimic that at home? And like what are they eat? What are conures eating in the wild and how are they foraging and what are they doing so that I can incorporate that into the home for Mia? But you made a really good point because it's also important for us to observe them in our homes when they're in their cages, when they're eating, when they're just hanging out. What do they like to do? What do they not like to do? So talk to us a little bit about why it's so useful
I mean,
and what
firstly,
we should be observing.
yes, what you just said about, looking at the natural history, what they eat in the wild, what they do in the wild, really great. It's so useful to know that information because it can help us tailor how we do things in our homes to make things more natural to them because it's not a natural environment for them. And by doing that research, you can provide a better diet. You can see what sort of natural behaviors you can mimic in the home as well. Like you just suggested, you can have foraging opportunities and all sorts. But I feel observing your parrot is really important for just so many reasons. Purely because if you want to learn about your parrot and their individual traits, because we can generalize. Like I made this massive generalization about crimsons, but then we had that perfect example which you brought up about Charlie and Kipling. They're completely different. They have those similar traits, just like us humans. We're all similar in some ways, but we're all incredibly individualistic. We all have our individual traits. So if you want to learn about your bird, you can watch stuff that gives you a general knowledge about it. I've got videos on like parrot, cockatiel behavior, conure behavior. Those are great starting points. But to learn about your bird and what makes them tick and how they behave, you need to watch your bird. So you look at your bird, you get to know them, you watch them foraging, you watch them what signs they show when they're uncomfortable, you watch them what signs they show when they are comfortable, and then you learn so much about them, and then you can adapt your behavior. You can see what toys they gravitate towards, what are they scared of, what needs work, what the food is another example. What food do they love? What food do they hate? And then you can start to make your environment in your house better for them by that. And your interactions with them become better as well because you know so much more about them. It's like, when you're getting to know another human, you want to be friends with them. You get to know them first. You don't just walk up to them and say, "You're right, you're my partner, you're my friend," and
We're
like, yeah,
friends
please.
now.
Yeah.
That's what I
They're
did
just
to
a bit
Sophie.
like what? And these birds are like the same, we need to. That's why, again, buttering them up, so to speak, is good as well by giving them some treats as well, so they associate you with good things. So yeah, observation is really so important. It's so undermentioned as well, especially on
Yeah.
YouTube. Like in professional circles, it's mentioned quite a lot more because observation is key. If you don't observe them, you don't know what you're doing. But on YouTube and stuff, I'm just surprised at how little people talk about individual parrots and observing your individual parrot.
Yeah. I think that that's really great. And I'm glad that we're talking about this because, like, for example, with Mia, I've observed what she really likes to do. Like, what kind of foraging toys does she really like? Like these puzzle feeders, she loves them. So I bought her another one so that she has more of the things that she likes. I also observed that she really loves destroying Sola sticks or
Yeah.
like softer wood toys. Whereas, like, if I get her some bigger toys or other types of toys that have like harder materials, she doesn't really touch them. So when we're observing our birds, then we can also like save money by not buying toys that our parrots aren't even going to touch or want to destroy. And, even like with their food, if we're observing like, oh, my bird really likes red peppers, but I know that they also need to get some greens in their diet instead of just eating just the red and the orange veggies. So then you can figure out ways of how to incorporate that into their diet and sneak it into their food and things like that. So that observation is really key. And another thing I also want to touch on is that it's also important to observe their behavior and how they're acting and get to know their sounds, because then you can also know, like, when are they happy and content? When are they relaxed? When are they excited? When do they want to play and feeling playful? When are they angry and about to bite me so that you can avoid the bite? So I think that it's also really important. Can you share with us like a couple of behaviors or sounds that conures or cockatiels might show before they're feeling like happy and joyful or relaxed or angry and about to bite?
So let's just start off with Pickles. She's not angry or relaxed or stressed, but she wants to go for a poop, which I'm going to let her do. And she wants to go to Sophie now. She's done in here. She wants to go. So first of all, I'm going to get her back in the other room with Scampy, her
All
partner,
right.
so she can play. And then we'll answer that question because she's getting fussy. She's explored the bed and she says, "I'm done now." Okay, so let's start with Happy. Happy's a bit anthropomorphic to start with. So when we say that, it means like putting our emotions onto our parrots. Now, there's nothing to say they don't have their own version of Happy, but the way we describe happy is kind of different. It's best to just watch what they do on an individual basis. So let's take, for example, let's just use content or relaxed instead. For a cockatiel, content and relaxed may look like your cockatiel's beak grinding, and that's the same for all parrots. All parrots will grind their beaks. It's very cute. I love the sound.
I love it.
It is adorable, isn't it? It's really relaxing.
Yeah. I love it when she's like bee grinding in my ear. I'm like, you are so cute right now. I love this.
My favorite. I love it when they sit. It relaxes me. It makes me feel
Yeah.
comfortable. They do that when they relax. They also tuck their feet up. They'll fluff up a little bit. Those are all relaxed postures. Another good sort of sign that your parrot may not necessarily be relaxed, but it's not really stressed, is the eye. If the eye is like, parrots mostly have round eyes, so if it's like fully open and round, then you can see your parrot's like, "Oh, I'm a bit nervous about this environment. What's going on? Maybe something scary is there." If it's more of an oval shape, they tend to be a little bit more relaxed, and that's quite a subtle tell you can sort of observe on. But at the same time, this sort of oval or round eye may mean they're excited or they're interested. It may not necessarily mean they're discontent or scared. What else is there? They'll tend to, as a generality, they'll tend to vocalize in a non-shouty way when they're happier as well, more content. They'll just generally be more explorative in their environment. They'll be just happier doing things. Generally, a sad or annoyed bird is one that will sit still and not do very much, and they just don't really want to interact with things. They're not very interested in things. I suppose that leads on neatly to signs of stress in parrots as well. So when your parrot's stressed, and again, you do have to take this with a pinch of salt because it's the individual bird and different contexts will affect different outcomes and behavior. But your bird may just sit still, fluffed up, both feet planted without one foot tucked up. They won't be vocalizing, they won't be beaky grinding, they'll just be sitting there and just looking like, I don't know what's going on. They may get excessively skinny, they may vocalize excessively, they may retreat from things and like visibly show other signs of fear. Cockatiels, great tell is the crest. For
Hmm.
conures, the back of their neck feathers are great tell. Has described that one. So when they go really skinny and all the feathers on a conure are back down, slip back, they're either very excited or very worried about something.
Yeah.
If they go really up like a lion's mane, that means they're either overstimulated or like feeling angry about something. If they're neutral and everything fluffs up, including their big chops, that means they may want to be petted and they're relaxed. It's the problem with parrots as well is like they all have a lot of these positions and stuff have different meanings, and the meanings are duplicated across different behaviors. And it can be kind of
Hmm.
confusing unless, again, like we talked about before, you observe them and you start to know
Exactly.
what these little tells are.
Yeah. I think with observation, it's also good to like take notes, keep a journal, do your research, watch videos, read online, and compare. And you also, I think, did a video about like information. And when you're looking up information on parrots, don't just stick to one source, go to different sources and compare. Are most of them saying that this is the relaxed behavior? Are most of them saying that this is, angry types of behaviors and sounds? And keep those notes so that you can learn, especially about the specific species that you have. You can even take videos when you're interacting with your bird, or when I take videos all day, every day. So I can always go back on videos. But I think that videos are also another really great way for you to be like, oh, this was happening, or this is how they're reacting, and this is happening with their feathers, to be able to understand, how they're feeling or what is making them react in a certain way. Um, which also I wanted to touch a little bit about on the anger. Now, I know you and Sophie have best behaved birds and you provide consultations. And I'm curious to know if you notice that a lot of your consultations are around like biting or screaming and building trust or having trust broken. Because when I get DMs and emails or people reach out to me, the most common thing is biting. My bird is lunging, my bird is biting. All of a sudden, my bird hates me, my bird is angry, my bird is mean, and I don't know what to do. So let's talk, or can you share with us a little bit about how to recognize the signs of when your bird is about to bite you, and what is the most common thing that you see in your consultations?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's
I
start
know.
with one thing as well.
Sorry.
So
I rambled a little bit.
no, it's fine. It's completely fine. You may have to remind me about them in a second. So I wanted to say something about the previous points as well. Like what you said about multiple sources of information is great. And one of the great things about your podcast is you get loads of different people on it. There's loads of different voices, loads of different things. So if you hear us saying the same sort of thing, you can be like, okay, that's a bit of a consensus, a scientific consensus on it. Because you've had
Yeah.
so many great guests on your podcast and people with different opinions, ranging from trainers to people who just like keep parrots, and it's all valid information. It's all very useful. So, it's a really great resource there. Again, go to multiple sources, but also sometimes if you have the bad sources, they can be useful information. Some of the bad inverted commas places can teach you good lessons about what not to do. You can see it, and that doesn't really align with how I think things should be done. So I'm going to ignore them. But anyway, let's go back onto the topic you were just mentioning. So let's talk about what we see most commonly, and then talk about biting and what to do about it. What we see most commonly in our consultations, and we get a lot of them, are like you just mentioned. Biting is exceptionally common, as well as my bird suddenly does this. Screaming is another very common one. Initial bonding work, how to sort of gain trust.
Yeah.
That's my top four. It's top three
I
probably.
always
How
get
else would
these
you think of
DMs. I'm
that?
like, go to best behaved birds.
Thank
Contact best
you.
behaved birds. Just let them know Santa sent you.
Yeah,
Actually, while we're talking about it, I want to let everybody know that when you go to best behaved birds in your consultation form, or if you email David and Sophie and mention the Parrot Pod code, then you get a freebie.
Yeah, we've got a freebie we've designed for you guys with all sorts of useful information and to help you with some of these problems. Just something that you can get as a little bonus if you do go via the Parrot podcast. So what was it? We had biting number 1, screaming number 2, bonding number 3, and maybe number 4 would probably be hormones, I reckon. We get a lot of
Oh
hormones
yeah.
as
We're
well.
gonna get into hormones too.
So we were talking about biting as well, didn't you? That was the other sort of topic. What's your
Yeah,
thoughts
yeah.
on
So let's
biting?
talk about biting, like, because this is so common, and people like I actually had somebody email me the other day saying that they just recently got a bird like Mia. It was hand fed just a baby, has just been weaned now on pellets, only had a few days. How do I prevent from biting? I've put my hand in her cage a few times with some food in the palm of my hand. She gets curious, bites my hand. I know not to pull away, but it's not the best feeling either. I don't want her/him to be doing this, even though it's not aggressive. So how would I fix this and prevent it?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I've got to just plug my channel a little bit. I filmed a biting series now because it's so common, and me and Sophie try to provide as much free info as we can. So I've got a whole series coming out, which this person should probably watch in the future. It's hopefully be helpful. So what that bird sounds like it's doing is beaking. So it's not biting because it wants to get a reaction. It's not biting because it wants to hurt the owner because it's got a bad association with it. It's biting purely because the hand's being presented in the cage and it's beaking, it's testing it.
Yeah.
It's a conure, and it's very common with conures as well.
Yeah.
So how I'd work on that is maybe not putting my hand in the cage initially to stop. The best way of preventing biting is stopping it from happening in the first place. That's pretty much universally accepted now. If you can stop it before it happens, it's less likely to occur. And by doing that, maybe this person, I hate calling it this person. I don't know what her name is, but it sounds
It
really
was
rude.
Stormy. They said,
Stormy. Okay,
thanks,
Stormy.
Stormy.
By Stormy. So maybe when Stormy puts her hand in the cage. I think it's the Conures name, but you know what? I'll just go with that. When
Maybe.
Stormy puts her hand in the cage, maybe she could watch the Conures' behavior and maybe watch before that bite happens. Maybe
Yeah.
Stormy shows a
Back to the
sign of it.
observation.
Exactly. Maybe she could put the pellets in a different way. The other thing that she could work on as well is withdrawing that hand before it happens. As again, so Stormy's about to bite, the feathers go up, just withdraw the hand first, then avoid the bite from the first place. And there's nothing reinforcing. You don't have to get into that point where you have to endure it and then remove it afterwards to avoid reinforcing it. The other thing that me and Sophie find very useful is something called soft targeting, and we talk about it a lot. Basically, most people will be familiar with target training, which involves basically, I haven't got anything to hand. Birdie, target stick with my finger. You get the bird to touch the end of the target stick with their beak, and you get a treat. It's very
Yeah.
simple, very great, very useful. With soft targeting, you can do this through the bars as well. So Stormy can train this way as well to start teaching good manners. Is you come in from further away through the bars, and then you get Stormy to touch the end of that stick with their beak ever so gently. We're looking at a touch on the tip of their beak or their tongue only. If they bite down, that's no good. You don't want to reinforce that. And we'll talk about what we can do there in a second. But when you consistently do this and reinforce it with high value treats, that bird is learning that interactions with that stick have to be soft to get a reinforcement. And then by extension, that stick is attached to your hand. So then they learn, oh, I need to interact with that person softly to get reinforcement. And then we go full circle to why treat motivation is so important, because if there's no motivation, then it won't work. But it's a great way of teaching young conures they have to be gentle, and also rescues as well, because we use that with Olive. Olive, when the very first day she came, she tore a chunk out of my hand because we were told she was all this and that, and we were like, okay, whatever. So we were dismissed that. But we used soft targeting. We respected her body language. We started looking, what is she trying to tell us? We sort of withdrew our hand before, she'd bite. And we constantly did the soft targeting to constantly teach her, this is how you interact with us. This is how you get your treats. This is how good things happen. We gave her a choice to say no as well, which is something that's really important to remember. Allow your bird to back off and say no. You don't want to force stuff.
Yeah.
And everything gets a kiss. So she does occasionally nip, but generally what will happen is she will kiss very gently. She will then give you a tiny warning nip, which is ever so gentle. And if you keep on pushing your luck, which we don't do, very,
Yeah.
very occasionally, if we absolutely have to, and there's something dangerous going on, then she'll bite. But we get a very clear warning before that, and she just generally wants to be soft with us. So yeah, to summarize that big
I love
ramble,
her.
she's adorable. She's such a sweet little, and she is so nice. She has Charlie as well, so they have a friend of her own species. Not he's a different species, another conure. That
Yeah.
We'll summarize that big ramble for Stormy. Try and stop the bite before it happens. So observe Stormy a lot. Try and see what's happening there. Maybe avoid putting your hand in the cage initially now as well, because maybe Stormy doesn't like that. or Stormy's uncomfortable with it. We don't know because I don't know the full context. Work on the soft targeting and generally see how it goes from there. Because if the conure is not biting because it wants your hand removed and it's just doing it for beaking, the soft targeting will sort it quite quickly. No promises on how long though, because quite quickly could mean a little shorter period or a bit longer. If it's something else involved, then you're going to have to observe that conure more carefully and look at other biting techniques. Do you want me to continue talking? Because I've got the biting protocol to what to do if you do get bitten, but I just feel like I've just shot out like a word vomit of information there.
Yeah, no, I love it. This is great. And I think that that was really great advice for Stormy and for anybody else who's going through this as well, because they actually finished off the email saying, I do want to hold and pet my bird, but I don't know the best way to go about it without forcing or scaring. So I think that that was really good advice. I've also had people like message me and be like, oh, my bird was like really nice and cuddly and sweet with me, and now all of a sudden they're lunging and biting. So yes, let's keep talking about biting, but I also want to jump in and say that like when we talked about earlier about like behaviors and sounds and observe that body language, get to know it, because if they're lunging, if they're puffing up, if they're hissing or look agitated, like you can tell by their body language. They're pretty good at letting us know when they're angry, and they give us those warning signals, like you mentioned, before they bite us. I mean, there have been instances with Mia, for example, where I like grabbed a marker for the first time for our whiteboard to write my grocery list. And I had no idea that this was something that she doesn't like. And she came for my hand. And then I found out, okay, she really doesn't like markers. So now I'm aware of that. So sometimes it can come out of like nowhere, it seems like, but they do give us warning signs if we're paying attention to them. And I also really loved what you said, that we need to respect their boundaries and their body language, because they are communicating with us, not with words, because they're not human. They don't talk, but with their behavior and their body language.
They're always communicating with us. As you just rightly said, we're not birds, so we're not going to see it initially, and that's how we learn. Neither me nor Sophie want to shame anyone, especially if you're a newer owner, to say you should know this, you should know that. How could you know that if you haven't had the opportunity? You could have done a bit of research, but it doesn't prepare you for everything.
Yeah.
And what you said earlier as well about recording stuff, taking notes, awesome advice. You do that, and you're going to get to know that bird. You're going to observe them. You're going to learn, and you're going to see those subtle signs. And the really important thing to remember here is if you consistently ignore those subtle signs, you're not going to see those subtle signs anymore. Your bird's going to learn that those subtle signs are being ignored. They're pointless. So I'm not going to bother warning you by ruffling my feathers, hissing or whatever. I'm just going to nail you, because that's the only way I'm going to get you to do what I want you to do, which is remove your hand. Because behaviors, generally, we behave to achieve something. All of us animals, including us humans, everything on this planet behaves to achieve something. We do things for a reason. A bird bites for a reason, and that reason may not be apparent to us. So we need to discover that reason by observing them, and then later on setting up what happens before the bite to make it less likely to happen. So yeah, there's some really good points you made there as well.
Yeah. So share with us some of your biting protocols that you mentioned.
Yeah, so the biting protocol is something we came up with because, again, in training circles, the advice is basically prevent it before it happens. But there's no advice for normal people on what to do when it does happen. And the problem is, if you don't have any advice for people to do what when it does happen, they're just going to do whatever they can, or they're going to go to the old school advice of dominance and punishment and throw your bird off, and oh my god, the stuff that really makes things worse. So me and Sophie thought really hard about a way of doing it where people will know what to do and how to react very clearly, but also avoiding actively harming their relationship with that bird and punishing it and making it worse. Because a great example here is, I'll just give one example before I go into it. A lot of the most common punishment for a bird when they bite is go back in the cage. You're right, go back in your cage, time out, off you go. The problem with that is that bird may not necessarily learn what you want it to learn there. It may learn that if I want to go back in that cage, I'm just going to nail you on that hand every time I want to go back in there. It may learn that your hand is not actually something very good. It just conveys me back to the cage whenever I bite. So you know what? Instead of actually bothering to do any sort of signs before, I'm just going to nail your hand when it goes near me because I don't want to go back in that cage. And then you have this horrible cycle. So to prevent all this happening, the biting protocol is very simple. The first thing you do is don't react. If you react to your bird, you might accidentally reinforce the behavior. And there's lots of other things that can reinforce the environment, but you can't control them, so we won't worry about those. So you present your hand, your bird bites you, don't react. And it's really hard. Bird bites you, it's hard. Conure bites hurt, even budgie bites can really hurt. So I know how difficult it is for you guys out there. It's the same for everyone. So you don't react. Next thing you do, if possible, is put them down somewhere neutral. So that could be a back of a chair we use as a common example. And then you try and disengage. Now, again, if your bird is on your shoulder and it's nailing you and you can't get it off, then the best thing to do is just try to sort of nudge it off with your shoulder. You don't want to be trying to grab it or make it worse. Just try and get it off onto that surface as like non-intrusively as possible.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you just turn away and you try and ignore them for a few seconds, just a few seconds, 1 to 3 seconds, no more. And then the most important bit, this is the bit that everyone forgets about. Everyone just does that bit and they're like, right, it's done, let's crack on, is give them a chance to earn something afterwards. And this is just the bit that makes this all work really well. So you've ignored the bite, you've popped them down somewhere else, you've ignored them for a couple of seconds, between one and 5, it's roughly just, it doesn't matter, it's just a period. You come back and give them something easy to do. You can give them a quick target, you can ask them to spin, you can even reinforce a moment of calm. And by doing that, you're teaching your bird that when it bites you, nothing really fun's happening, nothing good's happening out of that. There's no good consequence for that action. But when they engage with you and do something else that you do want to see more of, they get some nice reward, they get attention, everything comes back. So well, I'm not going to say very quickly, it depends on the bird and their learning history again, but generally, reasonably quickly, because your birds are smart, they will work out that the biting's getting them nowhere. However, engaging in training, interacting with you softly through the other things we talk about as well is going to get them what they want, which is a nice, tasty treat and lots of attention.
Yeah. I think that those are all really great points, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that a lot of people do forget to do that part at the end where you give them the chance to do something good, that positive reinforcement, and also redirect them to something else other than that biting behavior. Can you also share with us, because I think that this is something that's also very common when it comes to like biting and aggressive behavior, is sometimes people get a bird or a baby bird and they're like, my bird was really great and cuddly and cute and social, and now they're biting all the time, or I lost their trust. So we talk about, I think, on both of our channels a lot on like building that bond and building that trust and all of the things to do. But can you share with us, what can somebody do if they had the trust and they lost it?
So just again, the whole thing about the biting protocol, again, like you mentioned as well, if you stop at that point before you give them something else worthwhile, you're just punishing them. And if you keep doing that, it's not going to work really. It's not really an effective technique. It's certainly not a humane technique to work with birds. So what do you do if you've lost trust? Generally, you just need to rebuild it. If I say, for example, I broke trust with a friend of mine, I insulted them or I did something really horrible to them, I can, obviously we're human, so I can apologize, but that's not really enough generally. You need to rebuild that trust. I need to do things to rebuild that trust. It's the same with our birds. And the way you do it is obviously a bit different. I can't just go up to Pickles if I've accidentally, like, I don't know, touched her wing and she hated it and say, sorry, Pickles. She's like, oh, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So in a different way. So you do that by positive things again. So using the positive reinforcement, training with them, interacting with them, doing all those great things and working out why the breaking trust happened in the first place. Maybe you grabbed your bird and they didn't want you, they didn't like it. Maybe you forced them into a decision they didn't want. Maybe something in the environment's also causing the problem and that's causing a problem. One of the most common things for a lot of people is nail polish. They put a different color nail polish on. Some birds are very tolerant of it, some birds love it, but because of the material, the chemicals used in nail polish, it glows. And if you get like a certain type of nail polish, if you shine it under UV light, you may as well be just having a neon lights on your fingers. If your bird's not used to that, that is terrifying. So
Yeah.
just looking at what's happening in the environment can help you restore that trust.
Yeah.
What else is there? Really important. Oh, that's one other point there as well. Say, for example, that breaking trust has gotten to the point where it's so bad and that bird's nailing you every time it's out. You may have to go back to basics and just treat it like a clean slate, like you've just got that bird into the house, take away your expectations, ignore that, oh, my bird must be fixed in XYZ time that you see on YouTube a lot, and just say, right, I'm going to treat this for a clean slate. What can I do to help with my bird? What do I know that my bird likes? What can I work with? And then you can work on those things through the bars of the cage. Now, that's another sort of really big difficulty at home as opposed to in the zoo setting. In the zoo, that bird's generally going to be in an aviary. It's going to have lots of space. So if it doesn't come out, it doesn't really matter so much. It's got all that stuff. So if a breaking trust happens, you can work through those bars for as long as you want. In the house, you can't really do that as much. So it's important to use that protected contact, which is through the bars, to ensure your safety and your birds. Work on it as consistently as you can over a period. And it's not good for your bird, obviously, because you want it to be out. It's no fun for it. and just build that bond back up, and then test out having it out, and then protect yourself if you have to, like wear thick hoodies, work on other techniques. And this, I could ramble about this for literally an hour because there's so much involved in here. But
Yeah.
strike a balance between protecting yourself and your bird, and always consistently work on restoring that trust through the bars of
Yeah.
the cage. Protect yourself initially, and then later on outside the cage as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's kind of like going back to square one to try and rebuild that bond and use all those bonding techniques, but start over. And I think that the other thing is, start slow, but also it's like the way that we are and our demeanor and like our body language. Like, where if we're like flailing our hands and we're screaming and we're getting frustrated and angry, then they're going to feed off of that, and they're going to also be like terrified, like, what is going on? But if we like approach them calmly and talk softly, maybe start singing, kind of to let them know, like, I come in peace.
You can do
um,
that. It works quite well to talk softly to them, and the energy levels are really important. Flailing around definitely isn't for something we advise often, but also that can work in another way as well. Your bird can get overexcited. It may be perfectly
yeah,
bonded, really happy, but you start raising those energy levels, and your bird's going to bite you out of nowhere because it's gotten so overexcited, it doesn't know how to express it. So it just
yeah.
goes for you, and it's not even intended to really hurt you. It's just like, where do I get all this pent up energy out of?
Yeah. Stay calm, positive reinforcement, training, and just taking it slow. I really liked what you mentioned about the nails, because I get my nails done all of the time and I change my color like every month. And I know what you mean about the UV light, because I always put my hand under a UV lamp for the gel polish to dry. And in the first year, so a long time ago, this is a little bit of girl talk. You're like, Sandra, come on. But I always did my nails white. And that was just my color. It's the color I always did. So Mia was like totally fine with them. Or I did like really light pastels. And then I started to change up the colors. And I noticed that every time I came home after I had gotten my nails done, she was so furious with my nails and with my hands. And I realized that it's something change, and it's a change, it's new. And so it's scary to her. So it took me quite some time to desensitize her. And I would like start with showing them from a distance and see, like, as I got closer, she would get angrier. So I wouldn't go further than like showing her, where she would realize, oh, it's my mom, it's her hands, and I'm not angry from this distance. And then eventually she kind of just got used to it and she desensitized. It took me a long time, about a year of doing that every single month. But now she's a lot quicker. Like, if I come home with like a new nail color, for the first couple hours, she's like, what the heck? But then she'll eventually come and crawl into my hand and ask for scritches. So I just give her that space. But that brings me to the point of Parrot Vision. And I know you have a really awesome video on this, and you tried to demonstrate what parrots see, because they see a UV spectrum. And so they see things in different colors. And that's why some things might be more enticing for them and other things might be scarier for them. So tell us a little bit about Parrot Vision.
So I love the way parrots see. It's a shame we can't see that. They see more colors, they see the UV spectrum. Their vision is so much better than ours. What we see may look very dull. Like we see some parrot species and we think, oh, there's all one color, it looks really dull. But under
Mhm.
UV, or to them, that plumage is going to shine very brightly and very differently. Cockatiel is a good example. So we've got Chip, our cockatiel. He's a pied cockatiel, so he has lots of yellow and lots of orange and some white colors. Under UV light, the yellows and the whites really shine very brightly and prominently. Same with fish's blacks, they shine like blue. The cheeks obviously already orange, they stand out a lot. So the way they see is very differently. And as you rightly pointed out, what we see is completely different to what they see with regards to food. So what may be appealing to them is going to be based on what they see, because if you've got that wonderful tool to select food and at distance as well, why would you not use it? They don't really have a very good sense of smell. Their sense of taste is okay, but not as good as ours. So what does that really leave? It leaves texture, but you have to be really close up and you have to be putting your beak in it already, or vision. So they use their vision
Yeah.
to detect food. And yeah, I shined a UV light on some normal seeds, and some of them glowed. But then I shined it on some soaked seeds, and they really glowed, like lentils in there. The soaked lentils really glowed a bright color. And ironically, the birds went, well, not ironically, just basically they went for them first because they looked so appealing. So
Yeah.
using your parrot's vision and maybe mixing up what you provide, lots of different colors, lots of variety. And I'm not talking about colored pellets here, by the way. Those are no good. We can talk about it later if you want, but it's a long rant. Lots of different colors, lots of lovely things will help them try different things, and you can sort of like watch and observe what they really enjoy to try. And also, like you talked about as well, that desensitization method's great. Get your parrot used to scary things in a really non-intrusive way by just letting them approach it, reinforcing them for calm, not approach them too closely, and just over time get them used to scary things, because you'll have a much more confident and happy bird that way too.
Yeah. And give them that space. Like if something is new or scary or like, and I love that we're talking about this because not only do we need to get to know like their behaviors and their sounds and observing them, all these things that we've talked about, but it's also getting to know things kind of from their perspective. What are their taste buds like? Like they can't taste spice, so they can eat spicy peppers and be totally fine. If I eat spicy peppers, then my stomach is on fire. So and the way that they perceive colors and how they see them and all of these different things. So yeah, I think that that's really important and really great points. And I also think that it is very interesting, and nature is so wonderful in this way, that those sprouted or soaked seeds look more appealing, that they glow to them more, because that is an indication to them, I think, that like nature is telling them, eat me because I'm really good for you. And so that actually brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, and that's seeds. And there's a lot of myths about seeds, and seeds also get a bad rap, and people talk about seeds a lot online. And we can say one thing: an all seed diet is not great. It's not good for your bird. It's too much fat. It's not healthy. There's not enough variety in their diet. But seeds are really good and they are really healthy in moderation. So tell us, how can we feed seeds in moderation, and how should we feed seeds so that, we can use them as treats and things like that? But what can we do to make seeds healthier with less fat?
Okay, well, yeah, you're right. Seeds did get a bad rep, and for very good reasons. Feeding a parrot nothing but sunflower seeds, which was traditionally very acceptable, is no
Yeah.
good. Awfully high in fat. It's like if we eat nothing but junk food, it's not good for our health either. So it's all about diversity. And you had Dr. Jason Crean on your channel, who's a
Yeah.
great resource for this, and someone who's looked into it an awful lot. Lots of diversity, lots of different things, and making sure it's not just seed. So, not just seed, not just pellets. Any one thing in extreme is no good. Like a lot of people say only vegetables. That's not healthy either. If vegetables are very healthy, but only vegetables for a parrot, while better probably than all seed or all pellets, is still not ideal. You want loads of different things. And if you have everything, a nice balanced diet, your parrot's getting enrichment through that food, because there's loads of different textures, loads of fun things to eat there. But they're also getting all the stuff they need from that diet. For me and Sophie, for example, we would feed our vegetables, our chop in the morning, along with soaked and sprouted items, which we'll touch upon in a second, because I know you want to talk about making seeds healthier. And then we'll also have maybe some herbs, some flowers in there as well. A lot of people aren't aware that you can provide fresh herbs or flowers of certain types. They're really, really great for your parrot, and also help with hormones if you have the right blends. And then in the afternoon, we'll provide them their seed. We'll have some grains. We'll maybe have some tops pellets just as a very small extra. And then maybe we'll provide some other extras. Maybe we'll provide some spices to them. Again, they can eat some spices, and just have lots of different things in there. The more diversity, the more range of stuff you provide, generally the better it's going to be for your parrot, and the more of those nutritional bases you'll cover, rather than just providing one thing, or like a bag that says I've got vitamin X, Q, Y, and R. It's probably not going to be in there. And so, how do you make seeds healthier? Soaking and sprouting. Now, Sophie is the sprouting queen. She's very good at sprouting. She has an awesome video, Bird Nerd Sophie. She has a great video on sprouting. I tend to stay away from that. I go for the easier option, which is soaking. So
Yeah,
if
you're
you're
the soaking pro. So tell us how to soak.
soaking is much easier. That's why I like it. It's a lot quicker and easier. Whereas
Yeah.
sprouting involves a bit more effort. So with soaking, all you're doing is you're starting the germination process for those seeds. So you're naturally making them more healthier, because those fat reserves are starting to get used up in that seed. And sprouting takes it one step further and makes it an even healthier source. But with soaking, all you do is you soak an appropriate seed in some cool water for the appropriate amount of time, which I'll give a couple of examples in a second. You swirl it around, you rinse it, and then you serve it. Now, there's some
Do you
excellent
rinse
print.
it before?
You rinse it, so you need to rinse it just in case there's any stuff inside there that you want to get rid of,
Yeah.
drain it,
And
just
then you
to make it
soak,
clean. So
stir, and then rinse again.
yeah, yeah. generally. And then so the best one, the easiest one, which I love, is buckwheat. You can soak buckwheat for 15 minutes and then serve it. So, soak it, stir it, and then you can serve it to your bird 15 minutes later. And it's already started that process of making it healthier. There's some that only take a couple of hours. There's some that take 8 hours. There's loads of places that sell pre-made mixes if you can't be bothered trying to work out what's safe and what's not, that you can just get and you can just soak as a big mix and then provide the next day. Like, for example, Sophie will often soak a soaking mix she's made herself and do that overnight. And in the morning it's all ready. She strains it, washes it, and it goes straight to the birds if she doesn't have time for doing sprouting. And it's a great way of just making seeds healthier. And also, if your bird is a bit of a fussy eater, it doesn't want to eat like vegetables and other things, why not try soaking those seeds initially? It will still obviously get mostly seeds, but at least those seeds will be a little bit healthier for it.
Yeah. And soaking, I think, is really great because sprouting for some people can be really intimidating. And they're like, oh, I have to get this whole kit and I have to do this and, make sure I do this and watch it. And it can take a lot longer. And the grapefruit seed extract and ACV and all this stuff just to make sure like they don't go bad and you do it the right way and everything. But soaking is just so much easier and so much faster. And I think it increases the digestibility. It also increases the nutritional value and it reduces the fat in the seeds. So it's a win-win. And like you mentioned, if your bird's a picky eater and they don't really like vegetables, then this is like the soaking or sprouting is like that middle point between a seed and a vegetable, which I think is something you mentioned in your video as well. So let's get soaking. What are some of your favorite that you can share with us, like mixes that we can buy to soak?
Jason, on his shop Bio Bird Blends in the US, has a great one. China Prairie in the US is another great place to buy these sort of things. In the UK or Europe, we use Polly's Natural Parrot Boutique. But don't
Yeah.
forget this. We recommend these shops because we trust them and they're really good. But you can also make your own. If you get a reliable whole food store that has human grade ingredients, you can do just a very bit of research. Just going on our channels will be enough research because we test it for you and make your own mixes. It's quite easy. If you feel like it's very intimidating, you can literally start with one ingredient, give that a go, and it's the dry seed. It's up to you, really. I think it's important to explore these options because you never know until you try, and your parrot may really like them and start it on a train towards a much healthier diet.
And what are your top 5 favorite things to soak? I know you mentioned buckwheat.
Buckwheat, lentils of certain types. What other ones are there? You put me on the spot now for a little bit. Mostly
Groats?
because oat groats you
Oat
can.
groats?
It's mostly because we kind of just make a mix now, so I don't really think about the individual ingredients too much.
Quinoa?
Quinoa, that's a couple of hour one. That's quite a quick, easy one. Although sometimes doesn't look quite as appealing as others. Yeah, it's because we use the mix so much. It's made me a bit lazy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you can soak out there. It's just about just doing a little bit of research into it. My video is a great starting point, but there are other things you can do as well.
Okay. And before we get away from the topic of food, we mentioned colored pellets when we were talking about sight and what parrots see. And I think that some of these companies have figured this stuff out. And we know that colored pellets are full of sugar and fillers and other things, and they're not healthy for our birds. But I'm going to let you talk a little bit about colored pellets and your opinion, your take.
So I'm going to make this very concise as much as possible because it's a long topic I could rant about. So imagine if you fed your kid those cereals with
Fruit Loops.
things, Fruit Loops, whatever. I don't know. I don't want the Fruit Loops coming after me, but just a generic cereal with like colored stuff in it, with high in sugar, all that stuff. Your kid's going to be bouncing off the walls. Your kid's not going to have the best diet. It's exactly the same for our parrots. Those I tried one once and it actually tasted like human cereal. It was that sweet.
You tried it in
I
your
tried a
mouth.
pellet. Yeah, it tasted like human cereal. So that kind of tells you a lot that
Yeah.
big, I eat a pellet like that, so it's not going to do much to me. Imagine your bird eating that, and it's only a small body. So these pellets are full of sugar, and as you said, they are designed to appeal to a bird's sight. And your bird doesn't know what's good for it. Just like us, we sometimes eat things that aren't good for us, but in moderation, that's okay. But your bird, we need to provide that moderation. Your bird's not going to be able to self-select in that same way, especially if you're providing nothing but those pellets. And we had this like evolution of thinking when it comes to food. First, it was all seeds. That's what you should feed your bird. Then it was pellets, which is a bit better, because it was people were thinking, trying to go in the right direction. And now people are moving even further beyond that. And they're thinking, okay, well, why don't we apply the same rules we apply to us humans to our birds? We want a diverse diet with loads of different things, loads of great things. And pellets don't provide that. A lot of pellets will say, I have all these vitamins in me and all this other stuff. But if those pellets are heat treated, most of those vitamins, by the time it gets to you, are going to be denatured. It means they're not going to be of any use to your bird. It's just not ideal. And there's one type of pellet we still recommend, which is tops, purely because it's cold pressed, so that heat treating doesn't happen, and it's not
Yeah.
filled with sugar and other stuff. Now, would we feed nothing but tops? No, tops aren't tops or any pellets not an essential part of a diet. Would we provide maybe 5 to 10% of it rather than 80%? Sure. And even if you're not convinced by this argument and you think, well, maybe he's talking rubbish, you could just reduce the amount of pellets in your parrot's diet. Just provide them a smaller proportion, keep them in there, or use them for training treats. It's just when it's nothing but one thing, especially those coloured ones, they're my pet hate because we see so many problems with them that correlate to bad problem behaviours. It becomes an issue. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, I want to stick with my pellets, just reduce the proportion of them, mix them with other stuff, make it a part of your parrot's diet rather than the 100% of your parrot's diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's really important. And we also love tops because they're cold pressed, they're organic, they're non-GMO, they don't have all those fillers and stuff. And like Dr. Jason Crean said, like in those pellets, you can see the food pieces. And when something is heat treated, then we do, take away those vitamins and minerals. And we want to feed our birds as close to nature intended as we possibly can. So all these things are, not the whole diet, but small parts of the diet.
Mhm.
All right. Let's move on from diet. I have a few more questions, and I wanted to also pick your brain a little bit about what it's like to have a flock of 8 birds. What is your routine like? What does your home look like and sound like with 8 birds?
It's challenging, especially as we have a large apartment. It's quite a big one with lots of storage and stuff, but it is an apartment. So
Yeah.
our living room is basically our bird room. Apart from the birds, we have a desk with a work desk, a foldable desk as well, so we can put it out when we need to, and a TV with some stuff. That is it for us. The rest of it's dominated by the birds and bird-related stuff. They take up a lot of space, and we want to give them that space and give them the fun stuff they need. Routine wise, again, they dominate the routine. I feel honestly, if I could take back and I knew that these birds would have better houses elsewhere, better homes elsewhere, I may not have taken as many as we did on because it is challenging. But they are lovely and we love them all. So there we have it. So it takes lots of time. That's the only thing that comes to my mind. Like when we get up, Sophie's up before me and she's preparing their morning food. That's getting cracked on. And then she's doing an outing. And then I get up and then we have to do all the other outings because we've got so many different birds and they're all rescues. They don't all get on. So we can't
Yeah.
put them out just all out at the same time because it just becomes chaotic. Some will go out with others. For example, Pickles can be out and with Chip and Fish and Scampy sometimes. Olive can be out with Chip and Fish. Chip and Fish seems to get on with everyone. But then there's other issues which cause bad dynamics there. So we have to do all these outings separately. So it takes a lot of time. So our morning, we basically try to avoid having any consultations for work in the morning, purely so we can make sure consistently all the stuff that's important to them gets done and they get at least that whole morning with lots of outings and lots of time out. Because we took on their responsibility, we have to accept it. We can't just be like, whatever, you can't come out today. It's not fair. Then
Yeah.
we have lunch. We have a bit of lunchtime, maybe a bit of work time. Then it's outings again. And they're slightly shorter ones for this one because obviously we need to fit everything in. Then
Yeah.
we sort of do whatever else. I do the afternoon food prep, so I do all their dry mixes stuff, clean up the bowls, so Sophie doesn't have to do that as well. So I sort of share my part of the chores. Then we have a bit of time either to ourselves or to work. So generally between about 2:30 and maybe 4:30, we have a couple of hours to ourselves, which sometimes we have to do consults in. And then after that, it's basically dinner, and then it's shorter. Sorry, not shorter. It's then more bird outings. Then we go and we work again, or we have
Yeah.
maybe some time to ourselves. So having 8 birds is very demanding, especially if you want to do it right. If we had a different environment, it'll be easier. Honestly, if we had more space, then it'd be much easier because maybe one of us could go and work elsewhere while the other one's doing outings, or maybe we could give them an aviary. So then the importance of having them out with us will be less important because they can enjoy the aviary space, which we're really jealous of people who have that, because if we had an aviary, we could get even more work done and maybe have some time to ourselves as well.
Yeah.
It's challenging. It's
Yeah.
challenging, but it's worth it because they're lovely birds, and obviously they are part of our lives, a big one. But I like anyone, I do get frustrated with it sometimes when it's something I really want to do for myself and I just can't fit it in because so much other stuff has to be done. And Sophie often reminds me it's not their fault. You know, they're in our environment, so we have to sort of step up and make sure they're number one. And occasionally, maybe we will be like, okay, we'll go out, we'll do this, but as a rule, they have to come first and they dominate our lives basically.
Yeah. And it's a big responsibility. And I'm really glad that you were honest, and I appreciate that because I think it's important, especially for someone who maybe has like one or two birds and they want to grow their flock, or they see these social media accounts and they're like, oh, I want to have so many birds. But you don't realize how challenging it might be and how much space all of the cages are going to take up, and also dealing with their different personalities. Like you mentioned, they don't all get along. So you want them to all have out of the cage time, but they can't have out of the cage time at the same time because you don't want to have conflicts or them getting
Oh,
into
something, yeah.
squabbles and things like that. I also wanted to ask you on that topic, how do you ensure that like each of the birds has that like socialization and all the right like mental stimulation and exercise on a daily basis?
Training's a big thing. Making sure they get lots of training and one-on-one time with both of us. Making sure they have foraging activities both in and outside the cage, because we don't want the cage to be a cage. We want it to be big, spacious, and have lots of fun in there too. So that's a good space for them. Foraging both in and out. The training, making sure that we keep our birds in pairs because we think that's best for them as well, because they always have companions. Now, we're going to do something on my channel with you talking about that as well, because me and Sophie aren't anti one bird houses. There's a lot of places that say, no, you shouldn't do it. And while it's better to have a pair, it's not essential. You can, as the flock, you are a human, you can be part of that flock, you can give your bird a lot of what they need. And we always say, would rather have a parrot with one parrot in a great home rather than two parrots in somewhere they don't care about. So
Yeah.
yeah, just making sure all those bases are covered and they have all that interaction and time with us. And something that's really important, I thought I'd mention as well. A lot of social media places, I've got a bit of a bugbear of them again on social media. They show these huge flocks of parrots, but they don't show what goes on behind the scenes. They're not really honest about it. A lot of the time, the birds are just sat there or in their cages. And a lot of people do it right, by the way. I'm not giving everyone trouble, but a lot of places don't show you what happens behind the scenes and how much not honest about how much time they get out. And then some of these places are even luckier. They have aviaries, and that in that context, that's completely fine. You know, those birds are getting their interactions as long as they're not just kept on their own, which is like kind of boring. I was going to tread on some eggshells there. So let's talk about that briefly. So there are some influencers out there who recommend you should always keep your parrots on their own and that you shouldn't have it with other parrots because it's easier to train them. And I would disagree with that because we have pairs and they're all fine. But also, if you're going to do that, if you want to go down that route, okay, but make sure that parrot's getting interaction from you. And if you've got, say, 16 parrots and you're keeping all those 16 parrots on their own like that, and you have to give them all individual attention and time, you don't have that time. I'm sorry. So
Yeah.
that's where it becomes a bit inhumane. And there's a couple of big influencers who do something like that, and I really don't agree with it. Solo parrot, if you've got time for it, or keep them separate, is fine, but you have to step up and do that. So it's just unfair on them, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that it also depends on like every individual person's situation. And if you do have the time and the space and the budget to have more, then that's great. But I also think that it's important to, do the research and also understand like what your routine's going to look like and how your life is going to change. If you love to travel, for example, if you're going to have a aviary full of birds, it's going to be hard for you to take a 2-week vacation to Mexico, And back to the routine part. So, even if you have one bird, and this is why we talk about this stuff on the podcast, and we both have YouTube channels, and we talk about all these things because we want to bring that awareness to people. And we want these birds who are out there they're born, they're out there, we want them to have good homes, but it's important to know what you're getting yourself into. And like you mentioned, like having a flock of 8, it dominates your day. Like sometimes you want to do something for yourself and it can be frustrating because you need to make sure that you're also being there for your birds and letting them have their outings and feeding them and all these different things. And even with one bird, it still takes a part of my routine every single day. Like in the morning, the first things that I do are around Mia. Like I get her up, I get her breakfast, and then she's hanging out with me. I also find ways to incorporate her into my routine. But I also do find it easier to, for example, get some work done because she just hangs out with me like this. And so she likes to be with me. And I also take the time every single day to clean up the mess at the end of the day that she's made, to clean up the poops, to vacuum everything off the floor, and then in the mornings refill all her foraging stuff so that she's got things to do, because I also want her to, be independent and have things that she's able to do. So yeah, I think life with one bird versus a flock is very different as well. But I think another thing is it also depends on the species.
Yeah, the species, some again, generality, some can be more demanding than others, especially if you've got a big parrot as well.
Yeah.
But it's then conversely, some small parrots can be very demanding. The species requirements offer attention. Again, that's why doing your research is important. I don't think anyone should necessarily be precluded from having a parrot entirely. It's just being prepared for it.
Yeah,
As I said, even with one
exactly.
parrot, all the work you have to do. I see the foraging in the background there, and it's awesome to give your bird the choices to do it. And like you said about the work, sometimes when the boys are out fish and chip, they enjoy sitting on my shoulders. And I obviously with the beak grinding, I love it too. So I can get some work in there or do something else. But yeah, different species of parrots have very different requirements, and you have to be aware of those as well. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but I'm sort of
I've
struggling at the
heard
moment.
I've
We're
heard
talking about so many different
cockatoos
things.
are like really demanding like for attention. Like they're very cuddly social birds. They want to be on you or cuddling or chatting and dancing with you all the time.
Yeah.
And even I've heard with African grays, for example, like some people are like, "Oh, I want a parrot that talks." And then they get a parrot that's a really good talker, like an African gray, and they start to get annoyed because they're talking all day. They're in their cage, they're in their corner, they're just talking. And for some people, it's important. That's why we talk about how important research is, and researching species specific and researching what it's like to be a parent and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, African greys, very charming species. But yeah, and sometimes if people get annoyed, they pick up on the swearing and they start replicating that as well. So you often hear most African greys on social media will have at least one swear word in their repertoire, really because their owner has probably sworn at them at some point because they've been always chatting or being noisy. But yeah, cockatoos are a great example. Very demanding bird. If you take one on, great, and if you're prepared for it, but you will have to pay that bird a lot of attention. And then if you take on a bird and then you aren't necessarily prepared to give them that attention, then you start seeing more of the behaviors you don't want to see. Maybe they'll scream because they want attention. Maybe they'll start very destructive behaviors because they're wanting that attention, but you can't provide it. And it's why it's so important to just think about it. Anyone who wants a parrot should be able to get one if they want it, but they should know what they're getting themselves into, and then they can't go and say, "Oh well, I wasn't prepared for it," because it's like with any pet, when they get bought as a gift, it's just not ideal, really, and people are just like, "Oh, well, what do I do with it?"
Yeah.
And it's a mindset that's changing a lot of people. It's the old mindset was just an animal, so who cares? It's like just a kid, who cares? Now people are starting to think, well, hang on, these are things we're choosing to take on. We need to provide for them and do the best for them.
Yeah. And one last question in regards to your flock. What are the major differences that you notice between conures and cockatiels?
Conures and cockatiels. The conures tend to be more cuddly and more hands-on. The cockatiels, they tend to be a little bit less. They're more happy just being around you and on you, whereas the conures tend to want to be more involved with you.
Oh, yes, I know this very well with Mia.
Well, you saw with Pickles. I mean, although she was quite independent there, Pickles initially was wanting to know. She wanted my juice. She wanted the treat. She wanted to know what was going on with you. Then she
Yeah.
took a step off and explored, and then came back and started demanding attention right by me because she wanted to go out. But yeah, cockatiels can be a bit more scared of new things. Again, depending on individuals, they're a bit more neophobic because they're a little bit more scared of things going on in the environment and a little bit slower to adapt. What else about conures tend to be cuddlier. Now, green cheeks especially, they do have that cuddly aspect. Not every green cheek, some won't want it, but because they do it so much in the wild and they'll cuddle each other in massive flocks, they will replicate their behaviors with us. Now, not all of them will, and some of them may need to learn to trust us and adapt to it. But yeah, conures tend to be a lot more cuddly.
Okay. And I know Sophie's answer, but I want to know yours. Who do you think is louder?
Who's louder? Oh, conures.
Yeah.
Conures are louder, and especially the crimsons. My goodness, I didn't realize how loud they
Are
could
the
be.
crimsons louder than the green cheeks?
Yes, yeah, 100% louder than the green cheeks. I'd compare them to almost sun conure occasionally.
Oh,
I haven't I've measured that. I
wow.
can't prove that, but my goodness, when they get cracking, the boys are the least intrusive for me. They can get really noisy, but yeah, I think the conures are generally noisier.
Okay. Because you've worked with so many different parrots and you have cockatiels and conures at home, can I ask, do you have a favorite species? And if you do, what is it?
I do. It's cockatiel. I love my conures. They're all adorable. I love cockatiels the
Cute.
most. They're such underrated, adorable birds. I just really like everything about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So let's wrap things up very soon, but I wanted to quickly touch on this because 'tis the season of hormones. So right now is hormone season, and a lot of people are probably experiencing, hormonal birds and hormonal behavior. And I saw that you also had a video on egg laying. And you mentioned that cockatiels and budgies tend to lay more eggs than other species. Have you had any of your birds lay eggs? And what do you do when a bird does lay eggs?
So let's talk about what you do when they do, because I think it's be much more useful to people. What you do because none of our flock actually lay, because we use hormone management to try and prevent it and sort of try and nip it in the bud before it happens. But if your bird does lay eggs, the first thing to do is not start taking them out immediately, because that's more likely to lead to more eggs.
Yeah,
There's lots of different things you can do. The best thing to do is leave the egg alone and then get some dummy eggs of an appropriate size. They're little plastic eggs or ceramic eggs.
I have
Then
some. Let me
you
get
pop
them.
them. Oh, okay. I'll just talk about what you do with them then. So you pop them on the nest with the other egg, and then that tricks your bird into thinking there's a whole clutch there, which is quite useful. So Sandra's going to get us one now as well, so we can see what they look like. Yeah, they're really just so useful because it tricks your bird into thinking they laid an entire clutch. So then they won't lay anymore. So at least there's one. And once you've got them in place, you just wait until your bird starts consistently showing no interest in them, and then you just remove them, assuming they're infertile. If they're obviously hatching, then you've got another consideration to take there. But to prevent egg laying, it's best to just try and eliminate those hormonal factors before they occur.
Yeah,
Managing the diet a little bit, making sure they get enough sleep, making sure their activity levels are high. We can't ever get rid of hormones. They're natural. It's part of our bird's biology. But we
yeah,
can kind of like tip the scale a little bit the other direction so it's less likely to happen. And so far, me and Sophie have been very successful with doing that with our birds. Not a single egg since we got any of these birds. And
that's great.
I'm proud of it, to be honest, because
Yeah,
it does come with problems and all sorts of risks. And there are
yeah.
sort of more interventions you can consider. But generally, if you can do it without having to go down the vet route, it's much better for your bird.
Yeah. Another thing I want to mention for anybody listening is like avoid, petting them on their back or stroking their wings and their tail. Also, like being mindful of what we're feeding them, but not feeding like warm or mushy foods that could resemble like regurgitated food, not having any like nesting areas or cuddle huts. If you have those, remove those. So, yeah, hormone management is really important. And regards to the egg laying, I wanted to ask you, like, because I've heard of some people telling me about how their birds laid eggs and they just sit on the eggs or they're super territorial. How do you replace those eggs with the dummy eggs if they have like territorial behavior or they just don't want to get off the egg?
So a lot of the myths that go on around birds being unlike tameable and terrible in pairs revolve around this one behavior. Because once they've laid, they may get like that, and that is the bit where it is going to be more difficult to interact until that passes. But with regards to removing them, you want to have that good relationship. You want to have that training in place so you can direct your bird elsewhere, or just wait for that moment they go to eat. They need to eat and drink at some point, and you do need to provide it kind of fairly close to them because it may be uncomfortable for them to move too far. And then that's when you do it, that's when you do it. And if you can't do it, then it's best not to do it generally, rather than just making your relationship worse with them. Because when they do come out of that phase, you want to have the best sort of start with them. And you mentioned about certain species. Well, certain species are prolific egg layers. Budgies and cockatiels are adapted to lay more eggs purely because in the wild, they have to do it to survive. They need bigger clutches. They exist in huge flocks. So they need to lay more eggs to improve their chances of species survival. So that's why you get it more in those species. Whereas a conure, you can get prolific egg layers, but it's a little bit less common.
But I also know that you and Sophie have recently gotten into invertebrates, isopods, spiders, scorpions, all the stuff where I'm like, but the jumping spiders are really cute. And I wanted to know, what were your birds' reactions? Or like, do they see them in their enclosures? Are they curious about them? Are they keen on them? Or what has been your birds' reactions to all of these new pets?
It's kind of funny. I basically built a whole rack in our bedroom just so we could keep them separate from the birds, and then we could have them. But yeah, we're really keen on them. The birds, most of them are indifferent. So like Pickles and Scampi will occasionally want to look at them from a distance, but it's only one bird that really shows a lot of interest in them, and that's Kipling. And we sometimes make a joke that they're actually Kipling's pets, not ours. He constantly goes up to them. He likes singing to them. He will look at them and cock his head at them, constantly very curious. If they move, he's like, oh my god. I don't know if he wants to eat them or if he just likes looking at them. But yeah, they're Kipling's pets more than ours, I'd say at this point. I really like them as well because, as we talked about, those guys are so high energy, so much effort. These guys, I can just watch them. I don't have to interact with them. They don't have to come out. I can just enjoy them
They're
in their
easy.
enclosures. They're much easier. And I always wanted them. So it was nice to be able to explore that avenue. But yeah, they're Kipling's pets, not ours.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I remembered the other question I was going to ask you in regards to flock. When you brought new rescues into your home, how would somebody go about doing this, or how did you and Sophie do this to introduce new birds into your flock? Like, what's the integration process like?
You call it like the flock dynamic, like where if any time a flock changes, it's going to affect the social sort of interactions, relationships with those birds. But before that, we have to consider like the safety of the bird that's coming in and the birds, our existing flock. So if you can, before bringing the bird in, get them disease tested for common diseases, that will help because then you can cut down a quarantine period. Now, quarantine period is kind of essential normally, but if you do get them disease tested, you can kind of cut it down to maybe just a week. But generally, most people recommend a month for quarantine. So you have the bird in a separate room away from your flock and you sort of do biosecurity where you wash your hands, etc. Get a disease test, you can cut it right down. So that's the very first thing you want to do. Make sure that the bird is safe and that your flock is safe. After that, it's about slow integration. If you want to approach it very cautiously, having them in a separate room and then even if you don't do the quarantine and then bringing them in and putting them at opposite sides of the room. Say you're just introducing two birds. So you have one bird in its territory in its cage on one side, the other bird's on the opposite side and in its cage. And then what you do is you let them get used to each other. You very cautiously see how they interact around each other. Again, that observation is very important. Then maybe you can move those cages closer together and decrease the distance. You can start working on bonding exercises like communal foraging, communal training. Communal foraging is basically where you have either separate bowls at a distance, a safe, comfortable distance, then you gradually move them closer, or a giant plate or tray where they can share, teaching them to share resources. Communal training is where you just, each one of you just picks a bird and does training. And you just teach them that it's okay to share the space and that they are part of the flock together and they can coexist. It doesn't always work for every parrot, as we've got in our own examples. They're all individual personalities. Some of them will not get on, and some of them will bond very quickly. Olive and Charlie bonded within a month, really, really quick. Pickles and Scampi took us 8 months to bond. You know, some may take years, some may never happen. But at least by approaching it cautiously and using these techniques, you can achieve a level of tolerance. So at least those birds can be in the same environment together without fighting, provided you have enough space and enough resources to share.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. My last question is around a YouTube video that you also have, and I encourage everybody to go watch this because you have a part 1 and a part 2, and it's parrot owner or parrot. Yeah, parrot. I thought I said parent. Parrot. Parrot owner mistakes. So, what are the top mistakes that you have noticed and that you want to bring awareness to anybody who's listening to the episode? Like, what are things that we should just avoid doing, or maybe is something that we didn't realize that we were doing? And I know we talked about, like, for example, hormones. You might not realize that you're stimulating hormones when you're petting them on the back or on the wings. And so, that is sometimes a mistake that people make.
Yeah, it's definitely true. The petting ones are definitely a top 5 one, but if I was to do a top 3, it'd probably be rushing, not taking your time with your bird. Rushing is like people, again, thanks to social media, they'll get a bird and they expect it to instantly bond, instantly talk, instantly do this and that. It just doesn't work. So you can't.
Yeah.
Number 2, not doing number 2, not doing training. You need to train your bird. Training, we're all learning from our environment in the wild. As people say, oh, training is unnatural. It's rubbish. Training is not unnatural. Your bird will learn from other flock members. If you're in our houses, we are that flock member. We have to teach them. And then number 3 is not respecting them, not respecting their body language, not listening to what they have to say to us. Not obviously like not talking to us, but their body language showing us what we want to do or not do. And just denying them choice, basically. It's just no good.
Yeah, it's important to give them choices. Like that gives them also a sense of independence, and they should also be able to choose. I talk about this all the time, how important it is to give our pets choices. I give our dog choices, I give Mia choices, just like I have choices. It's important for them. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, so I'm gonna add it in there that sometimes people don't realize punishment is a huge mistake with birds. It doesn't work and it makes things a lot worse. And sometimes if you don't really, sometimes people don't realize that they're reinforcing bad behaviors. Another one that you mentioned in your video that stuck out to me that I don't think enough people talk about is they blame their bird. And it's not the bird's fault. And I know Sophie says this all the time too, like it's not the bird's fault. You know, we have to be respectful of our birds and we can't blame them for this or that, because we need to do our research and we also need to find ways to understand them and learn their behaviors and their sounds and what they're communicating with us.
I mean, those last 2 that you pointed out, they basically stem from the same source. We punish. There's a great sort of top level professor who does psychology and works like exclusively with animals now, called Dr. Susan Friedman, and she's very great about this sort of talk. The problem with punishment is great for the person who does the punishing. Punishment makes us feel better. So if your bird does something that you don't want and you start yelling at it, oh, you this and that, that's making us feel better. It's not teaching the bird anything. It's not learning anything. It's not doing anything. It's not doing it in the right way. And the same with other elements that just don't work. You know, problem with punishment as well is punishment in the training jargon is very different to how a lot of people see punishment. Like punishment to us means just, you know, you've done a bad thing, you send your kid to the bedroom. Punishment in training circles means just call it positive punishment. Positive punishment is adding something into the environment to decrease likelihood of behavior. It doesn't just mean punishment. It's like a scientific definition. So it's why I try to avoid talking about punishment too much in short like sections, because if I get the terminology mixed up, it can confuse people. So when we're punishing our birds, it's not really teaching them anything. It's reinforcing us. And when we're blaming them as well, we're blaming them for things they have no real control over. We have all the control in most of the situations, you know. And if we start blaming them, that's good for us because we get a reason. My bird's dominating me. So that's a great label we can slap on there to blame it all on them, rather than looking at what's actually happening and what we can do to address that situation. It's just so important to look at what your bird's actually doing, observe what it's actually doing, rather than slapping all our labels next. We love doing it. It's natural for us humans. And just seeing what we can do to work on that behavior. Rather than saying my bird's dominating me, you can just say my bird's climbing onto my head. Rather than saying my bird attacking me because it hates me, you can say my bird is biting me because my hand is approaching my bird and it's uncomfortable. And when you look at it in those terms, you can start
Yeah.
fixing problems by addressing what's going on and looking at it scientifically.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a really good perspective to look at it. All right, let's wrap things up. I'm going to ask you a few funny questions and then we'll say our goodbyes. But before we do that, let everybody know how they can find you on social media and if they're looking for a consultation with you and Sophie, how they can do that.
Cool. So on YouTube and Instagram, I am the Parrot teacher. It should be hopefully quite easy to find now. If you want sort of like more formal help, we've got our business website called Best Behaved Birds, where we offer consultations. We have courses. We try and add more freebies as well. But if you want free advice and you want some help, we try to provide as much help we can on YouTube as a free resource. It doesn't always necessarily help us, but we're in it more to help as many people as we can and make a difference rather than just earn loads of money from it. If you want a middle ground between the two, we both have Patreon as well, where we have a private Discord server you can join, and we also have sort of exclusive videos going into the more depth of topics. And also, you probably watched Sophie on Sandra's podcast already, but she is Bird Nerd Sophie if you want to look her up too.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. All right, let's get into the fun stuff. If your parrots became scientists, what genius experiments do you think that they would do, or what amazing discovery would they have?
I think Scampy would try and discover how to eliminate the color orange from the spectrum. I
I was not expecting that.
yeah, that's what he would do. He hates the color orange. Like, it just really gets him wound up. What I think for most of them, it would either be an infinite seed machine, infinite millet machine, so they have food all the time, or a way to control us, so they could learn to speak to us and control us.
Okay, if your parents started a tech startup, what product or service do you think that they would create?
Oh, blimey. A human translator, just so they could understand what we're saying half the time.
Love it. Okay, if your parents were able to take a trip, what country do you think that they would want to visit?
Oh, probably America, because there's so many like awesome products out there to eat.
Yeah.
Very
All the
friendly.
brands are out there. They're like, we're going shopping. Awesome. And if your parents became chefs, what types of food do you think that they would make, or what specific types of cuisines?
Maybe they'd make things that would butter us up. Maybe they'd make pizza and burger and stuff, so they could reinforce us for giving up them good things. So it'll be a mutual thing. So they could give us what they want to see more of. Those are treats for us, so we'll behave how they want us to behave.
Awesome. I love it. Well, it was so great talking with you today, David. Thank you so much for joining me for a podcast episode, and I am sure that everybody is going to love this episode as well.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Parrot Podcast. I'm your host, Sandra from Poodles and Parrots. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode with David, the parrot teacher. He shared so much awesome info with us, and I hope that it helps you and your birds. And we'll see you in the next episode. Oh, and one more thing. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I'm not a licensed avian vet, behaviorist, or professional expert in parrots. The information provided is not intended as a substitute for professional advice from a qualified avian vet, trainer, or behaviorist. Please consult with a specialist for personalized guidance on your specific situation.